Darkcast Network, indie pods with a dark side.
Butch stalks through the house in the early morning hours, dragging his .35 caliber Marlin rifle by his side. He enters his parents' bedroom and stops, watching them sleep, so peaceful and calm in their slumber. Ronald Sr. looks nothing like the brazen, sometimes violent man he is known to be when awake. His mother, Louise, was just as much a victim of his father's abuse as he was. But in his rage, all he can see is a mother who didn't protect him. Butch lifts the rifle, aims, and coldly shoots both of his parents twice before turning around and leaving the room. He continues down the hallway and enters each of his 4 siblings' bedrooms, murdering them one by one. Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. then showers, puts his bloody clothes and the gun in a pillowcase, and dumps them in a storm drain on his way to work.
The house where this familicide took place, located at 112 Ocean Avenue in Long Island, New York, is infamous in the world of true crime and the paranormal. After Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. killed his entire family, the house was sold to the Lutzes, who only lasted 28 days in the home before fleeing. Multiple books and movies have been made about the home since the killing in 1974. It's arguably one of the most famous locations in the United States. So, have you figured out which spooky abode we're talking about today? The Amityville Horror House. I'm Amber.
And I'm Gina.
And this is Weird True Crime, Spooky Month Edition.
Let's go way back in time and talk more about the DeFeo family. Dad, Ronald DeFeo Sr., who was 43 at the time of the murders, was known as Big Ronnie and managed a car dealership owned by his father-in-law, Michael Brigante. Big Ronnie was married to Louise DeFeo, Michael Brigante's daughter, and the two shared 5 children together: 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr., or Butch, 18-year-old Dawn, 13-year-old Allison, 12-year-old Mark, and 9-year-old John Matthew. From the exterior, they looked like a loving, happy, and fairly normal, affluent family. They lived in a large Dutch colonial home with a swimming pool and a boat dock. There were even life-sized portraits of the family members hanging in the stairway of the family home. But, as is the case in many of these stories, things aren't always as they seem.
If you think about it, managing a car dealership doesn't really equate to living the lavish life that the DeFeos were proudly showing off. This is because Big Ronnie wasn't actually paying for that house or the life-size portraits that hung on the walls. Louise's father, Michael Brigante, bought the home at 112 Ocean Avenue for the DeFeos, allowing them to move out of their small Brooklyn apartment. He also gave Big Ronnie around $50,000 to have the portraits made. Daddy DeFeo did a great job portraying himself as a man who earned his way to a life of wealth and luxury, but that wasn't the only aspect of his true self that he covered up. Behind closed doors, Big Ronnie was an abusive and violent man, and most of that abuse was taken out on his oldest child, Ronald DeFeo Jr., or Butch, as he preferred to be called. Butch never knew which side of his father he was going to get, and he struggled to find common ground with Big Ronnie as he grew up.
Unfortunately, the bullying for Butch didn't end at home. He was an overweight child and was tormented often by his classmates. As he got older, he started physically lashing out against his father and the few friends that he made. Butch's family tried to take him to a psychiatrist, but he wasn't a fan of the sessions and denied that he needed help. This isn't really surprising to me, given the fact that some young boys don't feel comfortable being open in this type of environment. And I speak from experience here with one of my own kids who has needed to go to therapy for his own anxiety and other issues and refuses to open up to a therapist, and it gets us nowhere. So I completely understand where this is coming from. And besides, the whole reason this kid is lashing out in the first place is because he has no support system. He's being physically and mentally abused at home and bullied at school. That would make anyone lash out. Well, for some reason, the DeFeos thought that incentivizing Butch to behave by showering him with cash and a $14,000 speedboat would do the trick. Needless to say, it did not.
By the age of 17, Butch had become an LSD and heroin user and was expelled from school because of his escalating violent outbursts. Instead of trying to help him with his drug and behavior battles, the DeFeos gave Butch a job at the family car dealership with little to no expectations about job performance. He also received a weekly stipend from Big Ronnie, regardless of whether or not he even showed up to work. I don't know about you, but it seems like they're just throwing money at him instead of actually dealing with the root of the problem. Oh yeah, they also gave him a new car. So Butch, not getting any real help for his mental health, invested his cash in his new car, as well as guns, alcohol, and drugs. Sounds completely fine. No red flags here at all.
No, it's totally normal. Nothing concerning about this at all. Unsurprisingly, Butch's behavior continued to get more out of hand. He even tried to shoot his father with a 12-gauge shotgun during an argument, but the gun malfunctioned. If that isn't foreshadowing, I don't know what is. In 1974, just a month before the murders, Butch became irritated with what he felt was a meager salary, even though he had no responsibilities or was even required to show up to work. Yeah, spoiled much. Daddy DeFeo had entrusted him with depositing around $20,000 into the bank, so Butch planned a mock robbery with a friend to pocket the cash. Everything went according to plan until police showed up at the dealership asking questions about the robbery. Instead of calmly answering questions, Butch exploded into a mad rage. Of course, this makes police suspicious, so they ask him to go down to the station to check out mugshots of possible suspects, but Butch refused. This defensive response caused Big Ronnie to start having his own suspicions, but when he asked Butch about it, he was threatened with murder from his own son.
During the early morning hours of November 13th, 1974, Butch methodically executed his parents, Ronald Sr. and Louise, and his siblings. After dumping the clothes and murder weapon, Butch goes to work at 6 a.m. like nothing happened. Which is odd on its own, considering he never showed up to the dealership at a reasonable hour. He called home to pretend like he didn't know why his father hadn't shown up to work. And then around noon, he decided he was bored of the 9 to 5 and left to hang out with friends. Butch told everyone he saw that day that he couldn't get in touch with his family and feigned concern. In the early evening, he escalated his plan by running to a local bar and screaming for help. He told people in the establishment that someone had shot his family and begged for them to come back to the house with him. For some reason, some of the bargoers actually did go back with him to his house and were welcomed by a horrific scene.
Butch told authorities that he believed his family had been killed by the mob and even named a notorious hitman. However, it didn't take long for police to determine that the mob guy had been out of town during the murders. By the next day, Butch's resolve shattered and he admitted to the crime. He told the police, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." Butch DeFeo's defense attorney tried to build the case that he was an insane man who killed his family in self-defense because of demonic voices in his head. The judge didn't buy it, though, and Butch was found guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to 6 consecutive sentences of 25 years to life in prison. Butch died in prison at the age of 69 in 2021. While some articles say the motive isn't entirely clear, I think we're looking at a mentally unstable young man who spent his most vulnerable years being abused by his father. And when concerning signs did start to arise, Butch's parents just threw money at it to make it go away instead of actually trying to help him. Add in drug addiction and next to zero responsibility, and you basically have a ticking time bomb. As far as why he killed his younger siblings, maybe he was bitter or wanted revenge because they were treated better than he was. Or maybe they were treated poorly and he didn't want them to suffer the same way he did.
Either way, like we mentioned last week, gruesome events like this one can leave a lasting imprint on a location. George and Kathy Lutz definitely felt that imprint after they bought the home for a steal in December of 1975 for just $80,000. The couple moved into the home with their 3 children after they had it blessed by a priest. However, George claims that the priest felt a hand slap him in the upstairs sewing room and a voice telling him to get out. Daniel Lutz, who was 10 years old when his mother and stepdad bought the home, had his first experience while he was carrying in boxes on moving day. He said he walked into the playroom and found around 400 to 500 flies buzzing around the room. Daniel grabbed a newspaper and killed about 100 flies in 5 minutes and then went to tell Kathy, his mother, about his findings. But when he returned to the room, the dead flies and the newspaper were gone. In the following weeks, the family experienced many weird happenings around the house, like doors being ripped from hinges, cabinets slamming shut, and slime oozing from the ceiling. George also claimed that there were foul odors that would come and go throughout the house. The front door would open and slam shut in the middle of the night, and he couldn't get warm. But it is December in Long Island. Maybe it's just cold. To top it off, George said he would wake up at 3:15 a.m. every night, right when the murders were said to have happened.
In the 2012 documentary, My Amityville Horror, Daniel recounted visitations from unseen spirits and an angry pig with wolf-like teeth appearing in one of the bedrooms. In other instances, Kathy Lutz supposedly transformed into an old woman and even levitated. One night, while being held down in his bed by an unseen force, George could hear his children's beds slamming up and down on the floor of their bedroom. The Lutz family only lived in the home for 28 days before reportedly fleeing the home and leaving all of their possessions behind, including all of their clothes and even the food in the fridge. I don't care how scared I am. Clothes are expensive. There is no chance in hell I would leave the wardrobe of an entire family behind. This fact alone makes it almost unbelievable to me. I don't know about you, but I don't disagree. The Lutzes claimed the house was haunted by the ghosts of the DeFeo family, and 2 months after they left, a local TV station brought in a team of paranormal investigators and ghost hunters, including none other than Ed and Lorraine Warren. The group took photos during their overnight stay, including one well-known image where a boyish figure with large glowing eyes can be seen looking out from a doorway. Ed and Lorraine concluded that the house was inhabited by an evil supernatural entity due to its violent history. We'll post the image on our socials so you can see it for yourself. What do you think, Amber? Does it look legit? Let me find it for you because that's the image.
I mean, that's a little boy there.
Definitely a little boy. And this is the 70s. I mean, they were doctoring images well before this with, camera tricks and the way they I don't know anything about fucking photography, but I know there are things they can do during the development process to overlay things and make it look like something's there that's really not. So the skeptic in me is like, meh, maybe, but it definitely looks like a little boy.
Oh, yeah. And it doesn't, there are some that you can look at it and you're just like, no, that's fake. But that one is done in a way that, there's some good creep factor there for sure.
It's definitely creepy as hell.
For sure. The Lutzes used the public interest in the house to their advantage. They collaborated with an author named Jay Anson who published the best-selling book, The Amityville Horror, in 1977. While the Lutzes claimed to have never signed a contract with Anson regarding the book or subsequent movie that was released in 1979, they did receive $300,000 in profit from the book and movie franchise. In May of 1977, George and Kathy Lutz actually filed a lawsuit against Butch DeFeo's defense attorney, William Weber, along with other individuals and companies, claiming a misappropriation of names for trade purposes, invasion of privacy, and mental distress. Basically, they were claiming that their names were used by the media and other outlets without their consent. However, the lawsuit was dropped by the judge, and Weber, who, remember, was DeFeo's defense attorney, told People magazine in 1979 that the book was a hoax and the entire story was fabricated by him and the Lutzes while drinking several bottles of wine. According to George Lutz's other stepson, Christopher, who was 7 when they moved into the Amityville home, the details in the book and movies had been stretched to the point of fiction. He also said George was obsessed with the occult and tended to exaggerate the truth when it came to paranormal instances he had experienced in his own childhood. There are a lot more intricacies we could dive into regarding who said what about the house being haunted, and whether or not it really was. We're not going to get that far into it this episode.
And while the Lutzes enjoyed their time in the spotlight and the book and movie were made, Ronald Jr. was making attempts at freeing himself. Understandably, he grew resentful of the attention he got due to these supposed hauntings and the defense claim that he was hearing voices at the time of the murders. He even changed the story of that night multiple times, claiming that his mother or one of his sisters were guilty of the crime. Butch said that he never heard voices, and it was just an attempt made by the defense to prove that he was insane. Honestly, it sounds like the perfect storm. Man who had a horrible childhood, no familial support, and dealt with drug addiction kills his entire family. Defense attorney claims he heard voices. Man with interest in the occult finds a murder house for a steal and moves in hoping to experience something. Makes up a story with the same guy who claimed his client heard voices in this house. And then it's a book and movie franchise. As for the house, well, it went into foreclosure after the Lutzes abandoned it, and it was purchased by James and Barbara Cromartie. The Cromarties changed the address from 112 Ocean Avenue to 108 Ocean Avenue in an attempt to stave off the morbidly curious onlookers. After an uneventful decade, they sold the house to Peter and Jean O'Neill in 1987. The O'Neills then sold it in 1997 to Brian Wilson, not of Beach Boys fame, for $310,000. It was last sold in 2017 to an undisclosed buyer for $605,000. None of these owners claim to experience anything paranormal or unexplained.
I mean, if I could get a hold of a house and make a frickin' buck off of it, why not?
Yeah.
Sad, though. They took a tragedy and used it for profit.
It wouldn't be the first time.
And it won't be the last time.
No. I feel like this is not the only story of this nature that we have heard about.
Definitely not. And the fact that, like last week's Villisca Axe murder house, there's constantly more paranormal talk coming from it. And there's not been anything from this house. It was, it's definitely a tragedy. And I bet the house does have a little bit of that feel to it because,
Mm-hmm.
as we had said at the very beginning, it leaves a lasting impression when something that terrible happens.
Yeah, it's a sad situation. It's obviously, we're talking about a kid who grew up in a house with not enough support and obvious mental health issues that turned into drug addiction. And that kind of situation never ends well. And then to have a defense attorney who tries to claim insanity and hearing voices on top of it. And then that same defense attorney turns around and works with the family who bought this house and to make up this story. Which, I mean, there are probably some listeners who don't believe that that's true. To me, that sounds like a very plausible explanation for what happened here, especially considering that George Lutz was very interested in the occult.
Mhm.
And he was like, oh, this house where this entire family was murdered is for sale. And it's a steal because a bunch of people died in it. So we should definitely buy this and then use it to our advantage. So
If stuff like that had happened when he lived there, it wouldn't have stopped. If it's
no.
if it's such a strong presence, it's not going to just go away.
No, I
know Butch was abused. I know that I'm not saying that he didn't have a shitty upbringing.
It doesn't make it okay.
It does not justify murdering your entire family. I mean, I will never say murder is okay, but I could understand if he got rid of his dad. That is the source of his abuse. But he took out his mom and siblings too. Like, no, he to me.
Lost it. Yeah.
He lost it, and he had been such a spoiled brat. He got his way, and
and he wasn't getting his way, so this is
he
how
got
he
his way.
Yeah, which is very sad. And then to take a story that's already devastating and then just like use it to your own advantage to make some money is pretty gross.
And we all know how I feel about sensationalizing stuff, and that is the epitome of sensationalizing something, and I fucking hate it.
Yeah. I personally do not think that there's an actual demon or any sort of hauntings in that house, considering that nobody else that had lived in the house since then experienced anything. And I'm also a big skeptic when it comes to Ed and Lorraine Warren, but we can leave that for another day.
So I go back and forth, and my mom and I have had several conversations. There definitely could be some paranormal activity happening in that house due to what happened. But if there is, I would not think that it's to the level that they have claimed. And so that's why people that are there today or have been there in the past never experienced anything, because it's not that grandiose and sensationalized.
No. Could there be a little boy that's haunting the house? Yeah, because a little boy was murdered in that. 2 little boys were murdered in that house. So it's definitely a possibility. But I don't think that they would be there making beds shake and
slamming beds up and down and
making slime ooze out of the walls. Like that's movie shit. That's not.
It's exactly movie shit.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us for the second episode of Wicked Wednesday. We have 2 more haunted stories to share with you before the month is over. And a bunch of the podcasts in the Darkcast network are collaborating to bring listeners an entire week of spooky tales. So look for those bonus episodes in the week leading up to Halloween. They will be hosted by yours truly.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok to talk to us on social media. You can also catch the video version of our episodes over on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to get notified when the next Wicked Wednesday episode drops next week. Not to mention all of the other amazing content we have planned in the next few weeks, including our interview with Julie Murray about her missing sister, Maura, and her Engage with Empathy campaign. You don't want to miss it.
Stay safe.
And make good choices. Toodles.
Later.
Bye.
Goodbye.
You hesitated.
Later. I was like, what do I want to say?
What
okay,
do I
bye. He even tried to shoot his father with a 12-gauge shotgun during an argument. No, during an... Okay.
Durnin?
talking about Yellowstone too much.
Oh no, that's what I was about to say. Like, if I binge a few episodes, man, my accent the country starts coming out, and I will start yelling. No, it's not. I'm like, no, reel that shit back in.
He even tried to shoot his father with a 12-gauge shotgun during an. I did it again.
You did it again. You literally did it again.
During it.
During the early morning. What? What the fuck?